Taxidermia is a pretty gross film to watch. I'm not something that ought to be morally abhorred, just viscerally a bit very disgusting, I'm afraid. But that's part of it. But it's such a supremely filmic undertaking that I can't help but admire the project and its brazen execution. Taxidermy is the kind of film which I would be disappointed if it gets reduced to, even if the people who I'm describing would be fond of the film, reduced to this sort of like gross out, like bet you can't believe what you saw sort of picture. But I think as an act of filmmaking, as an act of sort of simulation of the macabre, I think Taxidermy is one of the more interesting sort of what would you say, like outsider, like a sort of, I don't know, abrasive film, interesting films of the 2000s, and films like this wouldn't exist after the 2000s. This is the kind of film it's sort of like it'd be like a film you hear about on the internet, whispered about in sort of horror / disturbing movie circles, a coveted DVD that you would order, and some sort of specialist shop would get it in, or at least in this country, DVDs are a bit harder to come by. You in the States would be fairly easy for you chaps, but or in Europe itself, where it's from. György Pálfi, the director, he's Hungarian. It's a Hungarian feature. It'd be sort of, a coveted DVD in the mid-late 2000s. And I think it's a really compelling watching experience, although I don't know many people who would be willing to sit through it with me. I'm just going to assume. Pálfi is a really fantastic filmmaker, actually. I don't even know if this was I suspect I'd heard of this film and I would mean to check it out for some time. I usually get confused with another really brilliant film from around the same time, which also started with T and is from continental Europe, known as Time Crimes, and Alon Vigilando. That film was very influential on my feature, Joys of Waving, actually, as was Primer, clearly. But no, with Taxidermia, it might be it's a possible favourite of the three Pálfi films I've seen. Earlier in the 2000s, there's a film he directed, a very disturbing film, less sort of black comedy oriented and more just sort of straight up sort of psychological exercise. It's called Huckle. There was an incident the purported historical incident of the early 20th century in, I believe in Hungary, somewhere in Europe, where a bunch of sort of aggrieved and sort of just very discontented women in a slightly rural village, they ended up poisoning a lot of people in the village, including some animals, according to what you witness in the film, some of the more disturbingly yet unforgettable moments, in a negative sense, I suppose, in that feature. And yikes. Yeah, Huckle's an interesting work, as was a later feature he directed called Final Cut, Ladies and Gentlemen, which splices a lot of older footage together, and it's funny, you might see it listed as a credit of certain actors who had long passed, and you see them in a credit from a film called in 2012, and you wonder, is it archival footage of them in a documentary feature? Not necessarily so. You could decry this film as just cheap, gross shock value, but it's also as cinematic as it gets at the time, I would argue, without resorting to maybe a little bit, things like, excessive use of computer graphics or, cameras on cranes, things like that. It's an ultimate sensory act, and whether you want to make claims of good taste or not, if we're going to throw all like sort of polite society norms out the window, this is one of the most effectively tactile films ever made. Anyone who wants to deny that, they're just bitter because it was a bit too tactile for them, really. If I was resorting to cheap gore / simulation of pain, both psychological and physical, in the case of, 2000s torture porn stuff, just worthless dreck like Funny Games, or some of Nagisa Ishima's garbage from the 70s. And it is garbage. If you don't think it's garbage, your parents made way too much money, and your fucking economic class ought to give more money to people who they consider themselves superior to, but just by the basis that they consider themselves superior to, that's an admission of a certain, at least ethical inferiority, in my opinion. Anyway, we'll move on. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it really immensely. Thanks.